hello there. Welcome into another episode of the Leadership Sandbox podcast. I am Tammy J. Bond, your host, and excited to have a friend of mine in the sandbox with me, Mr. Bob Burg. I want to introduce you to Bob because I've known him for many years, and there are probably many of you that have also known him, but through his book, The Go-Giver, or maybe The Go-Giver Influencer. Well, for more than 30 years, Bob has been successfully showing entrepreneurs, leaders, and sales professionals exactly how to build and relationships and communicate their value and accelerate their business growth. And although 4 years he was best known for his sales classic, Endless Referrals, which is a great book, it's his business parable, The Go-Giver, co-authored with John David Mann, that has created absolutely a worldwide movement. While part of a 4-book series, The Go-Giver itself has sold over 1 million copies and has been translated into 30 languages. It was rated number 10 on Inc. magazine's most motivational books ever written, and it was on HubSpot's top 20 most highly rated sales books of all time. So great praise for the book. Bob is the co-founder of SalesWise Live, a sales mastery, an event for successful entrepreneurs, sales professionals, and leaders from around the world. And it's held in West Palm Beach, Florida. He publishes the very popular Daily Impact email. I recommend you get on the list, which you can subscribe to at burg.com. And Bob is an advocate, supporter, and defender of free enterprise system, believing that the amount of money one makes is directly proportional to how many people they serve. And he's also an unapologetic animal fanatic and serves as part of South Florida Rescue, Foster, and Adoption Organization. My friend, Bob Burg, is joining us today. So grab your pen and paper and step into the sandbox for a great episode of the Leadership Sandbox podcast. I'll see you on the inside. All right. Well, welcome into the sandbox. I am so excited to have you join me today, Bob Burg. Thank you for saying yes to this conversation. And thank you for investing the time for our leaders in the sandbox to get all of the great tips and tools around being a go-giver. So thank you for joining me today.
My pleasure. Honored to join you and all your leaders in the sandbox. How fun.
It's going to be fun. It's going to be fun. I laugh because I shared at the intro, just you and I have a fun background, but my favorite is that I took Bob Burg to go get a gumball at a gumball machine walking through a Costco and after he had a Costco dog for the first time. That's still my favorite.
Best gumball I ever had.
It's still my favorite. We've known each other for a lot of years, and it's always been so great to connect. And one of my favorite things that you do that I have done is your mastermind groups. You just really know how to curate, you and your Agent 99. You know how to curate the right group to come together in Jupiter. And I've enjoyed them so many times. So I really thank you for that and using that talent to bring together exceptional individuals to mastermind. It's one of my favorite things you do.
I appreciate that. She does such a wonderful job. And really, as you know, is the person who makes it happen. I get the credit. But just like Maxwell Smart always got the credit, Agent 86, but everybody knew it was Agent 99, Kathy Tagenel in this case, that who does the heavy lifting.
Very true, very true. Well, I want to get into talking about the 5 laws. But first, before we get into the 5 laws, I want you to share a little bit about you that's unique outside of the bio that I've shared, outside of all the formalities. What is one thing or 2 things about you that people maybe don't commonly know?
Oh, that's a good one. Probably that I'm very much an introvert. And I'm a friendly, outgoing introvert. You know what I'm saying? So I definitely derive my energy and really a lot of my joy from being alone. And at the same time, I very much go out of my way to make people feel welcome and to acknowledge people. So, yeah.
It's true. You do. You are very warm in your spirit in that way and very inviting whenever I'm in a room with you. That's definitely true. And I was somewhat surprised that when I learned the extreme introvert that you are.
And I am. It really is extreme. I know.
You mask it very well, Bob.
Thank you.
So that is something that I think will surprise people for sure. All right, so you've written a few books in your time, and you have this fun book called The Go-Giver that you wrote with John David Mann. And I want to understand from you, what was the driving force behind that, behind the whole Go-Giver spirit? What is what back in, you wrote it with 2007,
Yeah,
8?
yeah. It came out at the very, very end of the year 2007. So we say basically 2008 is when it hit the shelves, or virtual and real, whatever.
Right.
So yeah, so it's actually been out for a while now.
It has.
2008. I don't even know, 16 years now. So
Isn't that crazy?
yeah. Well, it kind of started with a book back in the 90s that I wrote called Endless Referrals. And the subtitle was Network Your Everyday Contacts into Sales. And it was really a book for entrepreneurs and salespeople who they knew they had a great product or service, but they didn't feel necessarily very comfortable or equipped to go out into their communities and develop the kinds of relationships with people where people would want to do business with them directly, as well as refer them to others. So Endless Referrals was sort of my system, if you will. And what is a system? It's the process of predictably achieving a goal based on a logical and specific set of how-to principles, right? The key being predictability. If it's been proven that by doing A, you'll get the desired results of B, then you know if you just do A and continue to do A, you'll get the desired results of B. So I did that so that these, people who again, believed in what they did and knew they had something great to offer could feel comfortable building these relationships. It wasn't something they had to dread or see as a necessary evil. And the basic premise was that all things being equal, people will do business with and refer business to those people they know, like, and trust. So the book was the system to get them to be able to develop those kinds of relationships. But it was a how-to book, and I always loved reading parables ever since I'd been in sales. Parables are stories, and stories tend to connect on a deep emotional level with people. And I always thought, wouldn't it be great if we could take that basic premise of the Go-Giver, that kind of focus on others and so forth, and put that into a parable. But I'm not a parable writer. I'm not a fiction writer. All my books were always how-to books. And finally, it was maybe 2002, 2003, I met John David Mann because I was writing a monthly column for a magazine. He was the editor-in-chief. And even back then, John's reputation totally preceded himself. I mean, everybody knew he was just a fantastic writer. And he was just a great guy and wonderful editor, and polite and humble, and always, very encouraging. And, when I kind of had that idea for the parable aspect, and asked him if he would be in fact, he was the only one I asked. He's the only one I wanted to do this with, and asked if he would be the lead writer and storyteller, because I knew he could really make this thing sing. And fortunately, after a few weeks of deliberation between he and his then fiance Anna, now lovely wife Anna, he said, yeah, let's do this thing. And so it didn't necessarily take long to write the book. And again, John was the driving force in that. But we went through 24 New York publishing house rejections over the course of the year before finally the 25th one, Portfolio, a division of an imprint of Penguin Random House, said yes. And they turned out to be the perfect partner.
That's great. That's great. And it is, I mean, I remember the first time that I read it, and I love how it comes together in the way it just, the parable fits because we can see ourselves in it, or we can see the people that we know in it,
Mm-hmm.
and it ties to I think, just for me, I remember it just, I could see myself in it. I could just, so I love that about it. And I love that, you, I was thinking about this as you were sharing, that you went from, I'm still stuck on the extreme introvert. you went from being you're an extreme introvert, but yet you've driven sales, and trained from stages and taught from platforms and about how to get outside of that introvert self. And I love how I just love that part of the story. I know that has nothing to do with the book, except that's you, and you are one of my favorite humans.
No, well, I appreciate, thanks. But Tammy, there's a difference though between speaking on stage in front of a lot of people and going to a party where you're part of a crowd, and there's a whole different kind of feeling about that. So I don't think
Yeah.
that's a big stretch. I think the big thing is, and people say, well, if you're an introvert, how can you be a networker? Well, here's the interesting thing about this. I think there's a not misnomer, that's not the right word. um I think there's a false premise in a way about what makes a good salesperson or what makes a good networker. And that is that it's the person who likes to talk all the time. Right. And, that tip, I remember I was at a Dunkin' Donuts, and it seems like half my stories are when I was at Dunkin' Donuts, because I tend to be there a lot, reading and drinking coffee and
Yeah.
having donuts. But that there was a little boy. I was in line, and there was a little boy who was talking up a storm, and somebody kind of knowingly said to another person in line, "Well, he'll be a good salesman one day." And what's the premise there? That because the kid blah 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 is talking, he'll be a good salesperson. Well, those tend to make the worst salespeople. They might be nice people, good people, and great to have a conversation with, but no, typically the best listeners are the best salespeople. The best listeners are the best networkers.
Yeah.
Because really, what is it about? It's discovering what the other person needs, what they want, what they desire, and
Right.
helping them to get it. So I think actually being introverted is more of a strength than it is a weakness. And someone who's just loves to talk, they can be a great salesperson, but they're going to have to first really get a handle on the talking part and
True.
be able to pull that back.
And that actually applies to leadership roles. Did you know
Oh,
that most people that are promoted into leadership roles are the ones that talk a lot, that talk really well? They always have the best ideas, and they're really great at conveying that vision or that idea. What they're not good at is the listening part. Exactly the same when it comes to leading people. They don't know how to lead people. They just know how to drive results.
Right.
Based on they are the loudest talker, the one that usually people listen to because they've always got the idea. And it's those thoughtful contemplators and those thoughtful listeners that are sitting back, that are watching, that are actually better on the people side when it comes to leadership, most commonly, because they have the same number one skill, which is the skill of listening, observing, asking discovery questions, seeking to understand. Same thing. I love that. That's a commonality there. That's great. And I am an extrovert for sure, but I think my introvert has come out over the years. I have a balance, but I've learned how to actually, the health aspect, I've learned how to become more introverted and recharge and bring myself together and separate over the years. But it's been an interesting journey. So let's talk about the 5 laws of the Go-Giver book, right? You've got your 5 laws, which are value, compensation, influence, authenticity, and receptivity. Yes?
Yes.
You know them well. And I know you've got the Go-Giver influencer as well. You're one of my favorite. I will tell you what my favorite one there is. But I want to, from your perspective, how would you see for leaders, how would you see that they could, or what would you offer for them for the law of value? Because I that's an important one for me. They all are, but that law of value, where does that show up for them, or how can they best utilize that in their day to day with their teams when they're leading?
Sure. Well, let's go back to something Dale Carnegie wrote in his classic 1936, I think, classic, How to Win Friends and Influence People. And I believe personally that this was the underlying premise in Mr. Carnegie's book and his teaching. And that is this. It's where he said, ultimately, people do things for their reasons, not our reasons.
Right.
Okay. Right. And so the best way, the most effective way for a leader to attain commitment right? Because we know there's two ways of, but two basic ways of leading. There's through compliance, which is push, which is, threat or manipulation or ordering, telling, right? That's the push. Or there's pull.
Yeah.
Pull is an attraction. Dr. John Maxwell said that leadership is influence, right? Nothing more, nothing less. So you think about it. You never hear people say, "Wow, that Dave or that Sandra, she is so influential. She has a lot of push with people." No, she's very influential. She has a lot of pull
Yeah.
with people. Pull is an attraction. And when we attract people first to ourselves and then to our ideas, now you've got that commitment that you've earned. Now, how does that manifest itself though? How does a leader do that? Well, again, we go back to Mr. Carnegie's people do things for their reasons. So the great leader, the great influencer is constantly asking themselves if their focus is in the right place, which is outward. Okay. And that's when we say, how does what I'm asking this person to do that I'm wanting to lead, okay? How does what I'm asking this person to do, how does it align with their goals? How does it align with their needs, their wants, their desires? How does it align with their values? How
Mm-hmm.
does what I'm asking this other person to do, how does it solve a problem or a challenge for them? How does what I'm asking this other person to do, how does it move them closer to happiness? Right? And,
Yeah.
how can we connect the goals or my vision, if you will, as a leader with all those needs, wants, desires, challenges, issues, happiness, and so forth? And I
Mm-hmm.
think when we ask ourselves these questions thoughtfully, intelligently, genuinely, authentically, again, not as a way to manipulate another human being into doing our will, but as a way of building everyone in the process, now we've come so much closer to earning that person's commitment instead of trying to, again, depend on some type of compliance. One of my great friends, she's such a wonderful leader. Her name is Dondi Scumaci out of San Antonio, Texas.
I know Dondi. Yes.
Yeah, all over the world, and she for some of the biggest, largest government. She's just a lovely human being, and I love what she says about this. She says, when it comes to leadership, when it comes to influence, Dondi says, compliance will never take you where commitment can go.
Yeah.
So it's so imperative for a leader who wants sustainable success to focus on how they can earn that commitment. And it's never by focusing on themselves, it's through
Right.
focusing on others.
Yes. It's so true. And um, Dondi's books, and you introduced us actually back in the day,
Yeah.
and I've had the opportunity to work with her on different things. And yeah,
Oh, I'm so
and
glad to
it,
know that. Two of my
yes.
favorite people working on projects together. I love that.
See, you are a connector.
It's like, yeah.
Yes, you are. It's your influence. So I love what you shared about the how the law of value from a leadership, and it is, yes, there is the piece of casting vision, but until we get into, and this is something I teach in our leadership sandbox, is when we get into understanding the view from the other person's chairs, that want, that drive, what's pulling, what's captivating for them, why
Right.
they're there, even asking as a leader, what brings you to this job? Why did you choose this position? That actually, when we're listening in, we then can use that to then reframe up how we are making our requests or setting out the path that we want our team to go, that ties to what your people have already told you that they value and their why, right?
Yeah.
It's a really great way. I'm curious though, the one that always gets me is the compensation
Hmm.
from a leader perspective in your mind. Because if they're, I see it from a sales perspective, right? I see it from a, I'm going out and generating something perspective, and that compensation for me, right, is about, I see where it ties to me, but I'm curious
Uh,
how they could use it with a team environment for the law of compensation from your perspective.
sure. So the law of compensation itself says your income
Yeah.
is determined by how many people you serve
Right.
and how well you serve them. And so what that's really saying is it's building on the first law, the law of value, which is all about the experience you provide for others, the great value, which is the relative worth, desirability of a thing. Okay. Now,
Right.
law number 2 takes it that step further. It says, okay, the value is that, and that's the foundational building block, absolutely. But it's also now a matter of how many lives you impact with that value. And that's going to, of course, affect your financial compensation. When you think about it, it's the same with a leader. Okay.
Yeah.
So, but with a leader, you tend to impact lives not just directly, but indirectly. And this is where it comes to, and again, Dr. Maxwell talks about this, and so many other great leaders talk about this. It's it's not only leading others, but it's developing leaders.
Mm-hmm.
And those leaders who can teach their followers how to become leaders
Yeah.
have the opportunity to impact the lives of many, many, many more people. And of course, assuming that in their company they're making a profit on what they're selling, that is going to add to the income.
Got it. Totally makes sense.
You can just build a bigger, more effective organization.
Right. Right. Yeah, it absolutely makes sense. I want to make sure because I love the law of influence, right? That it's determined by how abundantly you place other people's interests first. Really, that also goes back to what we were talking about and with the law of value as well. Just that, when we're putting out that, seeing what other people value and asking and listening, and that it all ties together. I mean, they all work very well together. And then the law of authenticity. That it's the most valuable gift that you have to offer, which is yourself, right? And being authentically you. I think leaders struggle with that word. I think that people today, a lot of times, the authenticity, I think they struggle with. Interestingly, my perspective is also transparency, 2 words that I get to go in and help people reframe for them. But from your perspective with the law of authenticity, how does that apply for leaders?
Sure. So in the story, in the book of the law of authenticity, law number 4 said, the most valuable gift you have to offer is yourself. And Deborah, who was the mentor in that part of the story, made the point that all the skills in the world, the sales skills, technical skills, people skills, as important as they all are, and they indeed all are very, very important, they're also all for naught if you don't come at it from your true authentic core, which we'll get into a little bit in a moment. But when you do, she said, not only do people feel good about you, they feel comfortable with you, and they feel safe with you. And this is key. Because as human beings, and Dr. Robert Cialdini in his wonderful book, Influence, Psychology and Persuasion, and he just did a wonderful update, rewrite in 2019, which was fantastic. But, he talks about consistency being so important as an element of human nature, dating back to the cave person days, when really, every day was a matter of life and death, surviving the day, right? And so your world had to be consistent. I interpret that as being, you had to know who in your tribe of 150 people had your back, or who was going to club you in the back, right? You had to know if that sound in the distance was a potential dinner or a potential diner. And it had to mean the same thing every time. You had to know what the footprints in the mud meant and what the bent twigs meant. And it had to mean the same thing every single time, right? This was, again, survival. Now, of course, we don't have that same issue today, but it's been, that need for consistency has been hardwired into our DNA, as they say. And so, if you've ever, had a leader, worked for a leader who was one way one day and a totally different person the next time you saw it, it is absolutely nerve-wracking.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And so it's really so important to have that consistency, to show up as yourself. Now, when we talk about showing up as yourself, though, I think that, and I've noticed it personally since the advent or since social media really became a thing. I don't know if I'm correct here, but this is just what I've noticed, that since social media has really become so prolific, the term authenticity has been almost hijacked in a way to mean something that I don't think it's almost like it means say and do, no limits, just no boundaries, say and
Right.
do whatever you want, or say
Yeah.
what speak whatever you want because it's authentic, and that's absolutely that. I respectfully disagree with that. That would be like the person who says, well, I have anger issues and I yell at people all the time, and if I were to act any differently, that wouldn't be authentic of me. That's malarkey. It simply means, Tammy, that that person has an authentic problem
Yeah.
that they need to authentically work on in order to become a better, higher, more effective, authentic version of themselves. So, we really don't want people to interpret authentic as meaning just do whatever I want. That's not authentic. Um, my definition, and you know me, I obnoxiously always define terms all the time, right? And so, my basic definition of authenticity is simply acting congruently with your values.
Yeah.
Okay, if you're doing that, then to me, you're being authentic. And again, to the degree you are consistently authentic, that's the degree people feel safe with you as a leader.
Right. I love everything that you're saying, and you're right. That consistency piece, that cadence of consistency, when your people get to come into the workplace and they know what to expect from you, meaning
Right,
what that
right.
mood is, what that reaction response is, what, that you're going to be um, clear in what you're communicating,
Ah,
asking, and expecting,
yes.
right?
Mhm,
That
mhm,
is so important. And when we're not, and I love that you brought in values, because I do a lot of work with in the core values and get people
mhm,
to identify that bullseye of what are those core values, because that's an operating system that you have. It's an internal driver that you have, and your reactions and
mhm.
responses are coming out of that. So when you're operating there, you're authentically you. When you're not, then that's where other people are in that mode of, can I trust him today? What?
Yeah, that's exactly what they're asking, whether it's conscious or unconscious.
Correct.
That's what they're asking.
Yeah, it really is. And then you get frustrated. I see leaders get frustrated because they don't understand why people aren't asking more questions, or why they're not
Mhm,
raising their hands if there's a problem,
mhm.
or why they're not communicating up front. Well, let's talk about what you're showing up like.
Right,
And can people trust that it's safe?
exactly.
Adam Grant, and Amy Edmondson, all the work that they talk about with psychological safety in the workplace, and how do we
Right.
create that? And this is
Mhm.
one of those components,
Yeah, yeah.
I think.
Yeah,
So,
oh, I agree with you, absolutely.
yeah. So tell me about the law of receptivity, and I want to make sure that we talk about the influencer, the 5 secrets of genuine influence. I actually want to talk about 2 of the 5, which is another fantastic book that you both penned. But
Thank
the
you.
law of receptivity, I think for me, was always the hardest one to get my mind around. Do you find that people have a challenge with this one?
Yeah, it is for most people. It is for
Yeah.
most people. And
Yeah.
the law of receptivity, first, it simply says that the key to effective giving is to stay open to receiving. Now, what does that really mean? It's simply understanding that, yeah, you breathe out. You also have to breathe in. It's not one or the other, right? It's both. You breathe out carbon dioxide, you breathe in oxygen. You breathe out, which is giving, you breathe in, which is receiving. Giving and receiving are not opposite concepts. They're two sides of the same coin. But Tammy, that's
They
not the
work together.
message we receive from the world around us. The world around us provides us with so many horrible, not mixed, but actually anti prosperity messages on an ongoing, consistent basis that it really gets into not only our conscious, but more insidiously into our unconscious. So
Right.
we've got 2 areas, but we logically, consciously, oh yeah, we want those things that we feel that we've earned and so forth. But unconsciously, if we believe that wealthy people are horrible and greedy and this and that, and poor people are good and nice and so forth, and so it can really mess us up. So yeah, that's a tough thing. And that's why I'm a big believer. And while John and I talk about it on a surface level in the law of receptivity, we don't go deep as a lot of others do. And that's why I recommend people like David Nagel. In
Yeah.
fact, we remember we used his book at our
Yep.
Beyond the Mastermind,
Yep.
the Millions Within, I think is the name of his book. It's wonderful. People like Ellen Rogan out of Chicago, people like the late Bob Proctor, people like Sharon Lecter, Ken Honda, these Randy Gage, who you and I both know.
Yes.
These people, they write, they speak, they blog, they post, they do videos, and on prosperity mindset. And 99% of what they teach isn't the how to. It's how to. Well, it is. It's how to get the blocks that keep us right from
Yeah.
allowing that
Yeah.
wonderful receptivity, which is our birthright. It's a very natural part, just as breathing out and breathing in. So I really think it's important to make a study of prosperity, that goes much deeper than what we taught. I think in the Go Giver that opened up a lot of people to it, because we got a lot of feedback that opened up, said, oh, for the first time in my life, I feel like I have permission to receive. And so and we love that. We took that as a great compliment, but we don't go into the real
Yes.
and so that's why I think it's very important to study those masters of prosperity who commit their lives to that topic.
Yeah, because it is that piece. It is a mental block beyond anything else.
Oh,
That law, that being
absolutely.
able to step into that receiving, and so many times. And I mean, I actually believe it also. It's cultural. It's related to,
Sure.
there are differences in gender. Men approach it different than women do. All of that impacts your past impacts, and the way you were raised from the moment that you were born, I believe, in my experience, impacts your ability to receive or reject, and being able to stay open to what that means to receive, and that it's okay. And then
Yeah.
how do I model that within my environment, for my home, my kids, my community, for my people that at work that I work with? Very a huge opportunity for people to really transform the way that they even experience life, from my
Well,
perspective.
I think that's one reason why your clients are very blessed and very fortunate to be working with you, because I know that you do, work on that, and it's something you bring to them, which is of great value.
Well, thank you. That's high honor. I appreciate that. I received that, Bob Burg. So I know we have just a few minutes, and I could not tell you, I could not let today go without being super excited about the 5 secrets of genuine influence from your Go
Okay.
Giver influencer book. And my two favorite, these are the two. I know there's 5, right? We've got master emotions, step into the other person's shoes, which is always a good one, set the frame, communicate with tact and empathy, and
Mhm.
let go of having to be right. And
Yeah.
I
So,
want to tell
so
you
I'm
my
interested.
favorite.
So I'm curious. Yeah, I'm
I
curious. I
want to
want to
tell
know
you
what,
my
what your
favorite
two
too.
favorites are of those.
And I see this show up all the time, and it's probably my favorite because they're the two that there's 3 that I work with a lot, but 2 for sure. I work with all 5 of them. But master your emotions. I love that. That's number 1. That is one of my like favorites. Like, if I say all the time, lead yourself well before you lead others. And that includes
Oh.
mastering your own emotions, right? Because if we're emotionally, same what we were talking about with the receptivity, right? Or before
Mhm.
receptivity, when we were just talking about,
Authenticity
the
and
authenticity piece, that if I'm not showing up as me in my wholeness of being
right.
authentic, and my emotions are all over the place, I'm not creating a safe environment. I'm not creating a trusting environment. I'm not creating an environment where people want to do a dang thing with me or for the greater good, right? So master my emotions is so important. And then letting go of having to be right,
Yeah, it can be so
because that,
tough.
I think, leads into delegation. I just talked with a group of people about it yesterday who are struggling as middle managers with how to delegate, because they don't trust that people are going to get it done as well. It's like,
Mm.
oh, so you have to be right? Like, does it have to be your way?
Yeah,
Those are
and it's
my 2
funny.
favorite. And
Those
I
are the
also love the other
bookends.
person's shoes.
Yeah. Well, in the other person's shoes is all about understanding the clash of belief systems.
Right.
right? Because as we were talking about the belief systems from, our upbringing, environment, schooling, news media, all the things but by the time we're a little more than toddlers, our basic set of beliefs are pretty much etched in stone.
Yeah.
Right. And so we grow up with a certain set of beliefs that we didn't ask for. We
Right.
willingly accepted because we didn't know enough to check our premises and ask how they learned it and how this, right. And so we grow up thinking that we're operating from strength and consciousness and free will, when in a sense we're really operating in a matrix, if you will, like the first movie, right?
Yeah.
Where we don't even realize that we're operating within this constricted environment of thought. And so, but here's the other thing: we operate from our own set of beliefs. Well, so does everybody else. But we tend to think that the way we see the world, our basic belief system, the way we see the world is the same way everybody else does.
Yep.
Which makes sense. How could it be any different? It's all we know.
Right.
But it's totally not true.
Yeah.
And so
It's so true. I actually call it to, do a check on your BS, your belief systems, right?
yeah.
Because that BS can be driving you,
It
and
it is driving you and everyone.
when they are driving you in the wrong direction, then it's, reflect the mirror on self to understand what got me here, because that's what that may not be the direction that I want to go, but so often people push it external and look outside of themselves instead of looking internal at their own experience with whatever that past is that's influencing them.
There was a wonderful book that I read. I read this in the mid '80s. It was written It was published in 1960 by Dr. Maxwell Maltz, called Psycho-Cybernetics, and it was the first book that I had read that really introduced me to the power of our unconscious beliefs and how they I was never really aware of it before then. That was the first book, and it was just absolutely fascinating. And really, what you learn is you can never achieve more than your most limiting belief. And then in the second part of the book, he kind of shows you how to reprogram and so forth. But it was just the learning part that was a thing. I never knew that.
Yeah. Well,
And yet it's
we
what
don't talk
drives
about
us.
it.
That we know. Well, and most people really, most people don't really know this. And that's why, we live our lives without even. So I think the first thing is taking the unconscious and making it conscious.
Mm-hmm.
So we know we're operating out of this unique set of beliefs, and everyone else's too. And, that's why we, what was that great book by Don Miguel Ruiz, The Four Agreements, when he talks about don't make assumptions and don't take things personally. Of course not. It's not personal. They're operating out of their set of beliefs, and they don't even know they're doing it, just as we are, and we don't know it. So, yeah, it's interesting how human nature and the world works. And that's why I think, it's so important to really study and understand this stuff. Because if you don't know it, you're behind the 8-ball.
No, you recommended the Psycho-Cybernetics book, and I've read it twice. Like, it's so good. I got the audio and the print. I'm like, I'm at the gym and I'm listening and I'm going, it's just the reframing. And I work in this space, right? I have for all these years around our mindset, our beliefs, our values, how they influence the way that we show up, the way our body models our thinking, the way that our words are constructed, the questions that we ask or don't ask. All of that is so deeply rooted in past, but so many people don't look at it, and they don't take the time because they're trying to achieve that next goal, right? They're trying to go after whatever that next level is. And boy, the ease and flow that it brings when we get to understand that past self and behaviors and beliefs that are influencing us, so that we can influence others from a different place. We got to learn about ourselves, right? Lead yourself well before you lead others. That means understand what's influenced you to get you to this point, and then what is it, or what are the changes you want to make to get you to the next. So
beautifully stated. Yeah, that's a wonderful thing.
I'm curious before we say goodbye today, sir, what's your favorite? Do you have a favorite law or secret of within
that book? I think the part about set the proper frame, or reset negatively set frame, because framing, which is, for a frame can be defined as the foundation from which everything else evolves.
Mhm.
So if you're operating from a productive frame, you're actually 90% of the way to attaining what it is you want.
So
On the other hand, if you buy into someone else's unconsciously negative set frame, well, you're 90% the other way, right? So I think the frame is so very important.
I'm glad you brought that up because I really like that. I liked it from the, you have a great visual on it, but I like it from how it shows up for setting up really just how you're going to model, right? What are you going to,
Yeah.
what steps are you going to take? And it puts the construct to it. And I think that is important. And I'm glad you brought that up. So, all right. And our last and final then with you, I want you to give us what is one of your very favorite experiences in all of the speaking that you've done since 2007 with the Go Giver series, starting with the launch of the Go Giver book? What is it that you would say? What is maybe one favorite memory that you have from all that you've done to have the opportunity to impact and influence so many people with this wonderful material?
You mean aside from the two programs we did together out
Yes,
on the West Coast
aside from those.
and the gumball? Um, I don't know if there's one thing necessarily, but I think it's when John and I receive emails from people that, not only has it, touched their life in some way, but that they do it as a study with their family and their kids and so forth. I think we both really take it as the greatest honor when someone says that they have passed it along to their kids, or that they're doing like a family, study with it or something like that.
Yeah,
That says, okay, that's
that's
it doesn't
awesome.
get much better than to hear that.
Yeah, for sure. Well, families, generational, changing the generations, which is so good. All right, what's up next for Bob Burg? What are you working on? What
We
can
have
you
a
share?
series, yeah. Well, we have a series of Sales Wise Live sales mastery events that we've been holding now in West Palm Beach instead of Jupiter, where we held where
Yep.
we're holding the ones that you were there. We do this at the beautiful Ben Hotel
Mhm.
in downtown West Palm, right on the Intercoastal and the lagoon and the whole thing, right across from Palm Beach Island. And it's like a 2-day sales, really intensive, but we still keep it, it's not as small as the, that we did we had the 8 people, and then the, Kathy and me, and then our 2 certified Go Giver speaker coaches. This is more like 50 to 60 people, and my associates, Jeff West, Kim Angeli. Sometimes we have a guest speaker like the great Richard Wildman, and we really go detailed into the entire sales process. And it's so much fun. And I say that from my viewpoint. I have a lot of fun. Hopefully the attendees do as well.
Right.
But yeah, so that's what we're doing now. And we're doing those quarterly and just
Great.
having a blast with it.
That's great. I love what you're up to and just continuing to be so generous in the way that you're willing to influence and give and share to other people your knowledge and wisdom and the tools that you have. And I know that I'm blessed by them and have been over the years. So thank you.
Likewise.
Thanks
Thank
for
you.
being Bob Burg and being
And I
you.
receive that with gratitude.
All right, Bob. I cannot wait till the next time, and I need to come down and visit you. So I'll see
Can't
you
wait.
maybe
Absolutely.
down south soon. All right. Thank you for joining me in the sandbox today. It's been an honor. Hey, thank you so much for joining me in the sandbox today. It was so much fun having Bob Burg, and I want to say a big shout out and thanks to my friend Bob for taking the time to join us as we talked about his great books, The Go Giver and Go Giver Influencer. And I want to challenge you to go back and re-listen to this from the perspective or through the lens of how am I showing up as a leader today, and how am I using these laws or these principles to influence, to transform and change not just myself and the way that I lead, but the people on my team as well. Because that's where it comes together for us. Yes, lead ourselves well before we lead others. And then when we think we're doing great with self, let's transfer over to asking those around us, how am I doing? Such a great approach with this wonderful content. So I want to thank you for spending time in the sandbox with me today. You know, leadership is not something that you're born with. It's something that you grow into. And you took time to grow into your next level of leadership in the sandbox today with Tammy J. Bond and my friend, Bob Burg. And I will see you in the sandbox again soon. Make it a great day. God bless.